Up next, we have Céline Cousteau joining us. She's an ecological and humanitarian activist. She's a filmmaker, an author, and creator who works through different media, such as documentaries and art, in order to communicate on the interconnectivity between humans and nature. So she's a creator and CEO of Cause-Centric Productions. She uses storytelling to ignite action and amplify great causes. So I'm going to bring Céline in with us now, joining us from France. Hi, Céline. How you doing? Oh, you're on mute, Céline.
Now, how's that?
We got you now. Yeah, good stuff. You know, you would think in this virtual world we'd get used to that. I host like 60 or more live events a month, and I still forget my microphone a lot of times.
I was plugged into my headphones, and then I was like, I don't want to be wearing my headphones. And when I unplugged them, of course, there's a whole new thing to approve. Yeah. But here we are. Here we are.
And I'm so excited to have you joining us. And the story that you're going to share today is a great one. I think it was a couple of years ago we connected and we shared right when the documentary came out with classrooms all across North America. So I think this is just a natural fit to continue sharing with the Global Biodiversity Festival.
Indeed. Well, I'm really glad to be here. So I really appreciate the invitation. And what an amazing project you're doing, 72 hours live feed.
Yeah, it seems like such a good idea at the time when you have it. And then when you're in the middle of it, it's even better. That's what I'll say. Even better.
I like that. That's a good attitude. Well done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Céline, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit. I'm going to hide out backstage, but then we're going to have a little Q&A action after.
Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen so everybody can take a look at, here we go. Give me 1 second. And there we go. So hopefully everybody can see, and I will take that part away. The story I'm going to tell and what I'm going to share with all of you today is the story of this film, Tribes on the Edge, how it happened, what the film is about, and what's next, because there's always a next. So I started going to the Amazon when I was 9 years old, and this is a story that Joe has heard before, and some of you may have as well. My family is a family of filmmakers, explorers, and environmentalists. And in the early 1980s, my grandfather went to the Amazon to explore the region, which at the time wasn't very well known, and spent over 18 months there filming and bringing back stories. So I had the opportunity of going with him and spending a couple of weeks aboard his ship. My whole family was down there. Actually, my father was on a raft with my brother. My mom was off in a different region as she was a photographer. And my grandmother and grandfather were aboard the ship, and that's where I spent a couple of weeks. So
Céline, I hate to interrupt the flow, but I'm not sure that the screen share worked for us. We've got a black screen.
Oh, you do? Because I can see what looks like what I'm sharing. So let me see if...
can we try the share again? If you just stop the screen share and try the first option, the entire screen.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get it full screen for us. Hate to interrupt the flow because it's such a good
story. No worries. I can let me see if I do it this way, this works better for you. Can you see something there?
Yeah, let's try and go full screen.
How's that?
There we go. We got it.
Okay, good. All right, great. Yeah, I had to choose screen 2 as opposed to the actual name of the file. So now you have this beautiful image. So going back to the Amazon, early 1980s, we were exploring the region, bringing back stories. And 25 years later, I went back with my father on an expedition called Return to the Amazon, going back to places that my family had been to in the early 1980s. Return to the Amazon was a 2-hour special for PBS. We were filming in 2006 and 7, so I think it came out about 2008. And it was at that time that I was able to go into the indigenous territory of the Vale do Javari, 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 in the Brazilian Amazon. And we filmed a conference of the contacted tribes. And thus began my story with that region, with the people of that region, and with this project. So I just want to, I'm going to jump to this because this for me is a quote that has unbeknownst to me, really created and guided my life and the way that I see things and what I do. I came across this quote much later in my work and my career, and yet I think, like many of us, we read something, and when something resonates, we realize, oh, first of all, somebody else has known this and felt this and been able to articulate it. So humankind has not woven the web of life, but we are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. This was in the 1800s by Chief Seattle. This is important for me, for us to keep in mind when we talk about anything. When we talk about biodiversity, in this case, we talk about people on the other side of the planet. We talk about species, climate change. All of it's interconnected, right? So a pair of glasses is made by people and machines, and the materials come from somewhere. Your phone has elements in it that come from mines, where there are human beings, where there's an environmental impact. So our food system also is a very simple one to think about in terms of our connection to everywhere. So the way I see this story that I'm going to continue telling you and our place in the world is almost like a 3D web. And on that 3D web, you have all of these different elements. You can think of them as these little drops of water. Whenever anything moves, it moves everything. And that's what life on this planet is about. We aren't disconnected from anything. So when I take you into the Amazon, it's to keep that in mind, to not believe that, oh, this is just a story over there and I'm here, but that it is all completely interconnected. So going back to the Javari territory, it's here in bright green. You see the continental United States in transparent gray overlaid on top of the Amazon basin, which has a yellow border around it. That gives you the scale of the Amazon basin. So one might think, wow, it's so big, you know, the deforestation that's happening there. It's one football field a minute. And is that a big deal when it's that big? Well, yes, because it is a balance of our global climate. There is a tipping point. We've heard this before. When we get to a tipping point, recuperation is, I'm going to say, close to impossible as opposed to just impossible. So what we want to try to do is maintain the balance of all ecosystems. Now, the Javari territory is 85,000 square kilometers. That's the size of Portugal or Austria. In the United States, it's the size of the state of Maine. On those 85,000 square kilometers, you have about 7,000 indigenous people in 6 contacted tribes, and about 2,000 people of those 7,000 are uncontacted. So they are still nomadic. We know of their existence from flyovers. We estimate their numbers by looking at the size of the main house, and then we estimate how many people are there. Largest number of uncontacted people in the entire Amazon. The Javari territory was named irreplaceable in terms of biodiversity by the IUCN, but not a lot of studies have been done in the area in terms of its biodiversity. So one of the things we're proposing to do, and I won't elaborate too much on this session for the sake of time, but the film Tribes on the Edge has catalyzed an impact campaign, which is about bringing back support and action initiatives to the land. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. On this map, you see, just as an example, and this is a different region of the Amazon. This is actually not in the area I work in. But in the top left corner, you see Manaus. Going towards the east, you see Santarém, and that's the Amazon River. Everything that's in pink is deforestation from climate change. From palm oil exploitation. Just that one palm oil exploitation, nothing else. If you look at this map, I'll just skip forward one and come back to this. If you look at this map, everything that's in orange represents indigenous territories. The Javari territory, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the Javari territory is this territory here, which again, 85,000 square kilometers, second largest indigenous territory in Brazil. Where there's indigenous land, where you see these orange territories, there's no deforestation. Unless it's illegal deforestation. There's no deforestation. There's actually less deforestation on indigenous land than there is even on conservation land, which means that our prior beliefs that the presence of people was detrimental to the environment is actually false. It depends which people. If you look at the notion that indigenous people are the guardians of this land, they are also the guardians of that biodiversity on which we all depend. So the presence of people is an additional and better barrier than the complete absence of people in this case. This is a statistic for me. I don't speak a lot of data usually, but this is something that for me is really important for all of us to understand. Indigenous people make up about 5% of the global population, yet they protect 80% of biodiversity on their land. If one just thinks about investment, okay, so let's take a step back. If one thinks just of investment, that's a pretty good return on investment. Protecting Indigenous people and their land protects 80% of biodiversity. So our best allies in world conservation are the Indigenous populations themselves. And going back to this notion of the Javari being 85,000 square kilometers, the work that we want to do beyond the film Tribes on the Edge is how is it that we can catalyze the attention with the film and bring support back to the Indigenous people, the way in which they determine and strategize the need. Because we are there as bridges to potential, but we are not living on the land, so the decisions need to come from them. So through our conversations, and unfortunately with COVID, we haven't been able to go back, we've come up with the Javari Project. So the Javari Project is a three-part initiative. I'm just showing you one piece of it. This three-part initiative includes a health support, a biodiversity analysis, and an alternative livelihoods program. What we have done is we've created an organization that works with collaboration and partnership. We're working with organizations on the ground in Brazil who have experience working in the territories with Indigenous people, and who already have a long track record of expertise on these different subjects. We're working with international organizations who can help us do the research or who have the technology to help us analyze the biodiversity and understand the information. And then other organizations on the alternative livelihood side of things who can help work with the Indigenous people on a life plan, which is a very long process of communication and understanding and listening to try to understand how is it that we can support them in having an independent economic self-determination as well as land governance and with language and cultural preservation. So this is a lot of information, but it's just to give you an idea that from a film, from this notion of creating a story, comes the possibility of doing so much more. Tribes on the Edge right now is distributed in the United States on streaming platforms like Amazon, YouTube, iTunes. You can go on the Tribes on the Edge website and find all of the platforms. But we really wanted to utilize it as a catalyst, as I've said. So we have created not just the Javari Project, but an education outreach program, which Joe, you've been a part of. Before we were all stuck in front of all of our virtual sessions, for 3 years, we'd been conducting virtual discussions with classrooms around the world, and we've reached over 7,400 students in 46 countries, talking about this project, talking about the story, all the way from kindergarten students to university students. And so obviously the subjects and the content shifts. We have extended that education program, and we're working with the College of William and Mary. They have the Institute for Integrative Conservation, which gives us access to the university facilities and to teachers and students. And we're creating a curriculum for kids 9 to 12 years old based on the notion of interconnectivity, going back to that quote by Chief Seattle, that everything is interconnected. And with the knowledge and input from the Maruvo peoples, one of the contacted tribes of the Javari territory, we're building this curriculum so we can start speaking to kids about the interconnection of their lives and ours of over there and over here. I think what's important in all of this, and the reason I showed this slide, is to know who you work for, to know why you do what you do, what your purpose is. And I show this symbolically as these are my bosses. This is who I work for. And when I have to answer to someone, this is who I have to answer to in terms of what I do. So the integrity with which we take these stories and bring them to the world and what we do with them is really about being at the service of those you tell the story about. The Indigenous people of the Javari asked me to tell their story to the world. They didn't ask me to sell it. It wasn't a distribution company. It wasn't any of the streaming platforms. It was them. And so they were the ones I had to go back to with the story to feel that I honored their trust in me in telling their story. The story was filmed in 2013, 14, 15. It took just as many years in post-production. And in November of 2019, I was able to go back to the Javari and bring Tribes on the Edge film to them. And that was the audience that I had done the story for. So everything that happened in between, showing it to film festivals, different audiences. We did a community tour in a van with my family to show the film in different places, including Yosemite National Park. Really came to that moment of being able to go back and say, here is the story and how the world has seen it. And that for me as a storyteller, as an Indigenous ally, was the moment that I felt there was a loop that was complete in the film itself, but not in the continued work. So I really feel that, when we look at something like this, and I take this quote from Margaret Mead, which some of you have perhaps already heard, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. I hope that that resonates with everybody watching, to understand that it's not just because I had the opportunity of going there that I can do something. All of us can. Beto from the Marubo tribe is the one who reached out to me by email in 2010 and said, come back and tell our story to the world. We want the world to know we exist and we don't want to disappear. When an audience member saw the film, and Beto was with me, and this was in Baltimore, we were hosted by the Baltimore Aquarium. Somebody in the audience says, Beto, what can we do to help? He said, now that you have seen our story, take it forward as your own. So that to me is really symbolic of what I hope we all feel today, not just in this session, but in everything that you hear, is that this story, all stories, belong to all of us. When we share a story, we impart knowledge and information and the possibility for action. And that's what I hope I was able to share a little bit with all of you today. And so with that, I want to give a little bit of time in case, Joe, you want to come back on and if there's any questions. And I hope it was clear because it was a quick run through of so much information.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. I love those images and that statistic. I mean, I just keep playing that over and over again in my head, 5%, but protecting 80%. I mean, it's just so important that they have an active voice to, that they know how to do it far better than we do. They're doing a far better job of protecting, and they're just so much more connected with nature. And we've really lost that connection. So I'm curious with, your thought process. You get that phone call back, I think you said it was 2010. You get that phone call. Was there any hesitation, or was it just, yep, I'm going?
Yeah, it was, yep, I'm going. This is also my personality is I'm very instinctual in what I do. I had met with them before when we were filming there in 2007. I knew I wanted to do something more because when I was there in 2007, we were attending a conference of the Indigenous peoples in the Indigenous territory. And that's when I learned of the high rates of hepatitis. They have a 50 to 80% rate of hepatitis, A, B, C, and Delta, as well as very high rates of malaria. And in that moment, you spend 3 days there and you just kind of feel powerless because you leave and you realize the weight of the issue. But you leave and you say, well, what else can I do? And the what else can I do came in 2010 when Beto said, we want you to tell our story. I said yes. And then I sort of sent the email and I went, wait, what am I doing? And you jump, you know what? I think we're all capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And this project has been a test of my conviction of that. I've been knocked down a lot of times over the course of this project because it's been very difficult to do for so many reasons that no need to elaborate. It's just been trial and error. And I've had to stand back up stronger to believe that I can do this. And I figure, Joe, they're fighting every day for their survival. What's my excuse? Why can't I stand back up and fight?
Yeah, absolutely. When you speak about fighting for their survival, what are some of the key threats? Is it mining, illegal logging, maybe disease, or just all of the above?
All of the above. Yeah, all of the above, unfortunately. So, I mean, I've talked a little bit about diseases that have come in from outsiders, and I encourage everyone to go see the film if you have an opportunity to do so. But it talks about, from the time of the 16th century colonizers coming in from Europe and sort of overtaking the land and exploiting the land and the people, bringing in diseases at that time, to even now, as the world has felt what a virus can do and the threat that it poses to our health, to our well-being, both mentally and physically, to our world economy, to our food systems. It's interesting because with COVID, I called Beto and I said, Beto, is there something that we can do? We're not an emergency response organization, so the best I can do is reach out to other people. But he goes, Céline, we've already seen this. We've already seen this. Our people know what this looks like. And so it's quite interesting that, here is this pattern, right, of return. Other illegal activities to the south, there's encroaching cattle farming and agriculture that is on the outside of the land, but that's coming north. To the east, there's illegal gold mining that's actually coming into the indigenous territory, which also threatens the uncontacted, pollutes the rivers and destroys the ecosystem. There's a narco-trafficking route that is basically a transportation system using the rivers, but that's just on the outskirts of the territory, and then illegal hunting and fishing coming in from the north. So it's intense and it's a lot to deal with. Yeah,
really facing threats from all angles. I can see why they're so concerned and really want to tell their story. Yeah.
And so, as we know, sorry to interrupt, as we know, the Brazilian government isn't necessarily very friendly towards environmental and humanitarian causes. So that's something that they have felt for not just, for this current government, but for a long time now. So as laws that protect indigenous people and their land are weakened, those that are doing the illegal activities are emboldened to continue and to increase.
Yeah. So the Javari, I wonder, what is their perspective? What do they think about us in the Western world? What I can only imagine what they have to say, what their thoughts are. I'm sure they don't hold back. How we use the land and how we're so tied to possession, and I can only imagine what they think.
Yeah, it's so I'm going to have to speak in a general way because I can't speak for all peoples, but what has been shared with me, and this is one sentence in the film we did in 2007 that stood out to me. He goes, "We see," and when I say white, they call all outsiders white. What we see on television in your white world is nice, but it's much better here in the jungle. And so with that statement, for me, that's quite simple, is some of your stuff's nice, right? But our life is better here. I get asked quite often, Joe, why is it, Céline, in your film they're wearing clothes? Or why is it that I see somebody with a cell phone? Or I saw a satellite dish in the village in the middle of the jungle. Why do they want a satellite dish? And my response is, it's interesting that we have this notion that they live the way they always have. Traditions stay, culture stays, language stays. People shift all the time. These are not primitive cultures. These are some of the most intelligent cultures I know. But as one person said to me when I said, why do you want to wear a pair of shorts? He says, do you have any idea how difficult it is to live in the jungle naked with all of those biting insects? And so I use that as just a very simple example to lighten our own idea and our own notion of how people should live, our own perspective and preconceived notions. They still hunt the way they do. They still live completely sustainably. The plastic that's been introduced, for example, is because they go to the city on the outside of their indigenous land and they buy 2 liters of Coke and they come back in with it. Those are the influences of the outside world. At 8 o'clock, the generator goes on and you hear the generator. You're like, what is that noise? And you walk into the chief's hut and there's a group of people, huddled around a 10-inch television watching Latin America soap operas. And yet in the daytime, and their rituals and their shamanistic ways, all of that still remains. I think we have to accept that duality is okay. Not everything is one way or another.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's just ignorant to think of them as primitive. I, take anybody from where I live and drop them a pair of shorts and a cell phone in the middle of the rainforest. That cell phone not going to help them very much.
That's somebody in actually that we met. He's a ribeñero, a riverman. He said, you can take somebody from the jungle and drop them in the city, and he'll figure out how to survive. You take somebody from your cities and drop them in our jungle. I'm like, that's true. Very true.
Well, Céline, thank you so much for answering their call. I know it wasn't easy. I know it was a process, but it's got to be pretty rewarding just to see how much it means that their story has been shared. They're hoping that now it's our turn to do something with that. So thanks so much for sharing that story. And of course, a huge shout out for joining us for this weekend of events, the Global Biodiversity Festival.
Joe, it's been my pleasure as always. As far as sharing their story, I just feel like I'm doing my small part. And I just want to inspire other people to feel that they can do theirs no matter what it is. If they choose their purpose and their passion, they'll do it every day.
All right. Good stuff. Maybe just before you sign off, if someone did want to check out the film, what's the best way to do that?
So they can go to the website, tribesontheedge.com. All of our distribution platforms are there, so they can check those out. I will be so bold as to extend that if they want to support the work that we're doing, there's a donation page there. We have a fiscal sponsor, and that will go back into our education initiative. Okay,
absolutely. A great cause. And yeah, there's not much more nobler than education. It's amazing how switched on this current generation is. Yes. And it's really inspiring to work with students, every day and connect them with scientists and explorers around the world. And they get it. They get it.
I think we're born understanding. I think we forget. We're coming back to understanding now. And I think that's beautiful.
Yep. All right, Céline, well, we'll let you get to your afternoon now, I guess. Thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully you can tune in a little bit more over the weekend.
Will do. Take care. Good luck with the rest.
Thanks, Céline. Talk to you later.